What is counterculture? Counterculture is a differentiating from the social norm. In the 1960s, there was a counterculture movement of hippies, peaceful protests, and a new age of music.
Hippies were against the man in charge. They called this the establishment. Literary movements such as the Beat Generation helped furthermore and instill the idea of sticking it to the man. This generation often describes in this feeling of being beaten down by the man. Hippies' views were something new to the generation, but many seemed to enjoy the spunky new behavior towards sexuality, race relations, traditional authority, and differing interpretation of the American dream. They focused less on material objects and more upon trying to reach a higher state of consciousness that would free themselves from materialistic values and way of life. Hippies often consumed drugs such as marijuana, LSD, etc.
The counterculture movement gained popularity and momentum through civil rights movements and the similar goal of ending the war in Vietnam in attempt at peace. Many people who called themselves hippies wanted peace and were anti-war. The protests often started out peaceful, then some fights would break out, and from there it would escalate, and the National Guard would be brought in to put an end to the violence. But the National Guard would often beat the protesters with batons, throw tear gas into the crowds, and some of the protests would end up with some deaths as a result of escalated violence. The United States government tried setting limitations on the obscenity of literature and movies, but the teenage and younger generations followed suit and rebelling and pushing the limits of the social norms of the time. Authors like Neal Cassady, Ken Casey, Allen Ginsberg all wrote books that followed the patterns and had the requirements of Beat Generation writing, which include highlighting the issues of the lower class versus the upper class, mental issues, and descriptions in writings that made it seem as if the author or character was under the influence of psychedelic or hallucinogenic drugs, and as LSD or psilocybin, also known as shrooms or magic mushrooms.
This age was also known for the new wave of music that came from it. Beatles, Bob Dylan, Grateful Dead, Blues Project, Velvet Underground, Jimi Hendrix, Rolling Stones are all well-known bands that formed at the time and many of which are psychedelically influenced. For instance, the psychedelic experience was inspiration for John Lennon's song Tomorrow Never Knows in the Beatles' album Revolver. Festivals such as Woodstock and the Newport Folk Festival formed at this time due to the new type of music scene that people wished to form. These festivals often featured songs with long jam sessions. Singles began to stretch for longer than the norm of 3 minutes, like Alice's Restaurant, which is a 17-minute long song. These festivals were another hotspot for the usage of LSD, shrooms, marijuana, and other drugs. Many people from older generations looked down upon these festivals because of the thought that they were filthy because of the earthy hippies and their openness about their sexual relations.
While the psychedelic hippie scene was mainly in California, the edgier scene rose in New York City and put more emphasis on avant-garde. Avant-garde is a term that describes people who are more focused on experimental or innovative with respect to art, culture, and politics. This usually pushes the boundaries of the social norm. Avant-garde promotes social reform as well. The 1960s, because of the events transpiring at the time, created animosity between people who supported the war and the people who protested peace. 1960s had a lot of protest songs as a result of this. I Ain't Marching Anymore by Phil Oakes, or Country Joe, and The Fish, I Feel Like I'm Fixing to Die.
The hippie culture that was looked down upon then made an upwards trend with its popularity and has become a social norm of today. The new counterculture of today is seen as goth or scene. The goth and scene today is frowned upon and not fully understood, mainly because of their preference of heavy metal tunes and their attire composed of dark clothing. The stereotypical view of festivals and concerts for this goth crowd is comprised of big scary men who headbang and worship the devil. For the most part, this is not the reality. Maybe they will soon become more understood, and the counterculture of today will become the pop culture of tomorrow.